is Navneet, and I'm the web performance architect for Akamai in the APJ region. So today we'll be walking you through a high-level overview of the serverless computing workflow that Akamai has introduced recently. It is called the EdgeWorker, along with a globally distributed data store called the HKV. In today's session, we plan to walk you through at a very high level about these solutions, how these solutions play a part in your workflow, what are the different use cases that you can look into, and how you can basically sign up to use this solution on the Akamai platform. Now, as we kind of proceed with this session, if anybody has questions at any point in time, feel free to type it into the Q&A section of the WebEx. Our team will be monitoring that space for any questions that comes in, and they'll be answering as the session progresses. Now, without any further delay, I will jump right into the session. The first thing that we'll kind of touch upon is what exactly is a serverless computing platform. So a serverless computing platform is basically an evolution of the current cloud hosting platform. In your current cloud hosting, you get the options to basically select the type of instances you want, the type of operating system, the framework that has to be used, the amount of capacity that you want to provision to kind of meet the load requirements that your web application would be entertaining, all these things. However, when we jump into something like a serverless platform, the vendor or the service provider offloads all these different tasks, which goes into kind of hosting and maintaining a cloud hosted infrastructure. So the vendor in a serverless platform basically takes care of all the scale requirements and the high availability architecture requirements, as well as the underlying framework. So this basically brings out the next question of what exactly is the benefit of cloud of serverless platform? What is it that it brings to the table which the current cloud hosted architecture doesn't bring in? The first obvious benefit of this architecture is help you improve the go-to-market time or the development time of your application. Now, a developer doesn't have to necessarily wait for any kind of admin related task to basically host or provision certain capacities or provision certain framework for their development code to basically work on. The developer is now free to develop the code logic which is required to execute a certain functionality and deploy to the platform directly without have to worry about all these nitty-gritties that comes associated with any hosted infrastructure. The second major benefit is obviously the scale and reliability part. Now that you don't have to kind of look into pre-provisioning the capacities for your requirement, and the entire task will be offloaded to a service provider who offers this. The entire onus of having a high availability and high scalable auto scaling platform will now be under the purview of the vendor. So which basically means that these serverless platforms are inherently built for scale and high reliability, as in when the user or the customer wants to kind of make use of it. And this actually translates to the next benefit of the serverless platform, which is the cost efficiency. So now that you don't have to necessarily pre-provision your infrastructure capacity and always keep paying for that high capacity that you have already provisioned, there is no ongoing or associated cost that you pay on a regular basis. So you just pay for whenever and wherever you use the serverless platform, and they are always on a pay as you use basis. So the entire operation of always having a fixed outflow, no matter what the actual utilization of your platform or the capacity that you have allocated, will basically bring in a lot of cost efficiency in the day-to-day operation of your infrastructure. Now, let's move on to the type of serverless platform that exists. Now that we have kind of talked about the fundamentals of what a serverless platform is, Now, when we talk about the different types of model in which a serverless platforms are executed, there are two main operations in which it kind of operates. The first one is what we call as the one vendor defined logic. So in a vendor defined logic, the vendor who provides the serverless computing platform has already pre-built an application which does a certain specific set of tasks that you ask it to. Now, obviously, this application will have its ability to kind of customize it and tweak it to your specific requirements. However, the underlying framework and what somebody can do with that entire platform is kind of already defined. Now, this definition pretty much applies to all the products of Akamai that we had till date. So the entire Akamai Ion delivery platform, the Akamai Kona Site Defender, the bot manager, the cloudlets, all the services that Akamai has been offering our customers over the last 20 years falls under the vendor defined serverless platform logic. Now, what Akamai is doing is that we are now moving to the other model of the serverless platform, which is the customer defined logic. Now, this is where the edge worker and the edge key value, which is the edge KV as what we call, kind of fits into the picture. Now, the inherent ability or the benefits of an edge computing globally distributed platform of Akamai still gets applied to edge workers and edge KV, just that we are now letting our customers define what will be the business logic they want Akamai to execute for them. Now, this business logic will now be defined by your developers or your business team, and it will be completely written in the JavaScript. Now, during the course of this session today, we will kind of walk you through the different things that an edge worker can do and how it operates. But basically, to give you that distinction of what an edge worker does and how it differentiates itself from all the other offerings of Akamai, it is primarily this specific section, which is about the way the serverless platform of Akamai will be used. Now, with that thing, I will just hand over to my colleague Ram. So he will walk you through at a high level about the edge worker platform, as well as give you a quick demo of one of the simpler use cases that we have implemented where an edge worker platform can be used. With that, let us transition to Ram. So Ram, over to you. Ram, you're on mute.
No, I'm not on mute.
Okay, now we can hear you, Ram.
Oh, okay. I don't know. I already removed that. Okay. So hopefully you can hear me clearly. Okay. So let me share my screen. Okay. So yeah. So to introduce myself, I'm part of the WPA team, Web Performance Architect team that Navneet and Mental belongs to. So let me share presentation. Okay, so Navneet gave an introduction on the serverless platform in general. So I'm going to specifically go more about Akamai's platform. So Akamai's serverless platform primarily comprises of basically, I'm sorry, just go back to comprises of three different modules. So as we see on the screen, the first one, we can see the edge workers, the core module. And this core module is nothing but actually a JavaScript execution engine. So which is the core module that executes the JavaScripts at the edge. And primarily it's comprises of the edge server, becoming a JavaScript execution engine. Okay, so, and it is using the Chrome V8 engine, which is deployed to every edge servers where it executes the code. Okay. And then subsequently, it is also integrated with the CDN traffic flow. That means it becomes an extension to the Akamai platform, so that whatever we are executing through the CDN, okay, we can complement those activities together with what we are doing from the edge workers. So it will leverage the best of the CDN capabilities as well as add additional code. So as what Navneet mentioned, the Akamai platform itself is a serverless platform, basically because it executes a set of predefined code, whereas now EdgeWorkers will execute your customer-defined code. Okay, so together, both of them coming together really gives the power of doing both. Now coming to HKV, the next module, this is basically a flat database. It's a NoSQL database which provides a key value kind of a set. So a particular key with a value together that is stored, and this actually helps us to support the edge workers with the required data. Okay, so you can read at catch speed and then support use cases that needs data which needs to be read frequently. Okay, and subsequently it can actually bring data close to the business logic instead of fetching the data from elsewhere. So instead of making third-party calls, it makes it easier for you to fetch the data from the HK. The third module is the developer tools module, which is basically a set of developer centric tools which are provided in order to make the execution of these, the testing of these, all those, the design of the edge workers use cases very easy. So it contains including things like the sandbox and other APIs, everything for the fast development, as well as when it is tested, it can actually, you can the developer can ensure the integration with the CI/CD, as well as deploy various activities such as troubleshooting, and then if there is anything which goes wrong, then it can be recoded and it can actually be redeployed. So all these debugging, monitoring, and activities related to the entire life cycle of the edge worker use case can be done using the development tools. So let's go specifically to the edge workers itself. So as you see, edge workers primarily happens at the closest point to the customers. So which means that execution of these, instead of going to the origin, those activities happens towards the edge itself. Okay, so this is, as we said, is deployed. The V8 JavaScript engines are deployed across all the 280,000 servers that are there as part of the Akamai network. Okay, and that helps us to make a very fast execution of this logic at the customer, as close as possible to the customer. Okay. So just to remind you, any questions, please feel free to put it on the Q&A box so we can actually answer you on that. And towards the end, we will unmute you so that you can ask questions. Okay. Now going to the workflow of the edge workers itself, there are two separate activities, as you see, two separate tracks. The first track is the administrator track, where the administrator need to initially enable the edge worker with the permission, the ID, so that the developer can actually use the credential to connect. And secondly, also can define the scope. The administrator can define the scope of the delivery configuration. So it can be a particular path of the URL, or it can be a particular condition on which the edge worker will work. Okay, so that is stored as part of the configure.json file. Okay, and once this is done, it activates the edge worker on the network. And once this is done, the developer can now actually start creating the logic on the edge worker. So what does the logic actually mean? It means actually creating the piece of code, right? So there are two portions again here. One is the main .js, the file, which is basically containing the JavaScript functions. So this is the actual code base which gets executed through the JavaScript execution engine. And then subsequently, we also have the version details, all those into a flat file, which is together bundled in the form of a bundle file. And this is uploaded into the Akamai cloud so that it can be executed based on the conditions. Okay, so let's go on to the details on how this gets executed. Okay, so the event trigger is the one which basically executes, or rather triggers the execution of the edge worker. So as in any program, there is basically a condition or a situation which triggers this. So here we have got 5 different areas where you can actually execute this. So one is the client request. That is typically the client make a request to the Akamai platform. That's when the request uh, can be is there, which can get executed. And if the platform is requesting that back to the origin, again there it can be executed. Similarly, when there is a response based on the response header from the origin, again this can be executed. And lastly, again from the client to the client response, Akamai platform to the client response, again the EdgeWorker script can be executed. Okay. Apart from this, there can also be those where there is, if response is not served from the cache, which is the 5th option, that is where we can have a dynamic response creation, which can allow to probably fetch some content from third party or other sources, which can also be another way of doing an execution. Okay, so typically we can define where the particular execution has to happen. Okay. So with this, I'm going to actually jump onto my demo. Okay, so let me run this my demo site URL. So I have a site called ram.test.hk.net. Okay, so if I run this URL on my site, I can see that there's a message saying hello Chrome 87. Okay, so this is a message I'm getting if I'm running this on a Chrome browser. Okay, so let me run the same thing on Safari browser. Okay, so I'm going to take this Safari browser and run this. So you can see the message comes as sorry, your browser is not supported. Please use a supported browser. So basically what it says is my site cannot be run on a Safari browser. So I will try one more, which is basically a Firefox browser. So it says, yeah, hello Firefox 84. So it tells me the name of the browser and the version of the browser, if basically it's a supported one. And if it is not a supported browser, then it tells me that it's not a supported browser for my application. And I need to upgrade, or I need to change my browser. Okay, so again, this is a example that I wanted to show you first before I jump onto the logic of how it works. So the idea is you can get a quick view of a simple edge worker use case. So I'm actually having typical problem where customer who come to my site, I do not know what browser version they are using, what browsers they are using. So I have done a logic to tell them whether it is a supported browser or not. If it's a supported browser, it gives them a hello message. If it is not a supported browser, it gives them asking them to change to a supported one. And even if it is a supported browser, if it is unsupported version of the supported browser, then it will tell them they have to upgrade to the latest version. Okay, so let's go and see how does this whole thing work. Okay, so you can see that basically this is the script on the left hand side that I've used to create this. It contains 3 major sections. As you see, the first section says that if browser is actually part of the list of browsers that I've listed out in this array. Okay, if it is part of this list, then it checks if version is part of the versions that is again in the array. So if the version is, let's say, 78 for Firefox, so that's the minimum browser version support that I have here. So if it is 78 or above, then naturally it gives a hi message, okay, saying the browser and the version from Akamai EdgeWorkers, okay. And if it is the version is not greater than or equal to, that means if it is lesser than that version number, then it gives a message saying the version is not supported. Please upgrade to a supported version. So this is for supported browser. If the browser is not in the supported browser, then it basically tells very straightforward message saying your browser is not supported. Please use a supported browser. So this is what you saw when I tried using my site on Safari browser, because I've not added Safari here. I only added Firefox and Chrome here. So this is a very practical example where one of my customers used to run this logic from the server. So I thought we can do that straight away from here. So as you see, the logic has got three branches for supported browsers, uh, uh, supported versions, and supported browser, unsupported version, and finally unsupported browser. Okay. So this here I've got the values for these browsers embedded onto the script. Now, Navneet will probably share more on how we can actually take this forward, even using the HKV exam, where these kind of values can be taken outside the script in the form of a flat database, which can actually enhance the capability of the script itself. Okay, over to you, Navneet.
Okay, thanks, Ram. Let me just share my screen for the presentation.
So I think there's a question from Lynn Dillon. Where are these JavaScripts running? Is it at the Akamai Edge server or at the client-side PC browser? Yeah, it's running at the Akamai Edge server. You managed to share, Navneet?
Yes, now I'm able to share. Just a minute.
Yeah, so please feel free to ask any other questions on the Q&A.
Yeah. So if anybody has any questions, feel free to drop into the Q&A section. Ram and the rest of the team is from Akamai is monitoring it. So they'll be responding to your chat as we progress. As Ram mentioned, right, there will be a separate Q&A section in the end of this presentation today, where we will unmute all the audience. So if you want to ask during that time, you can do the same as well. As Ram mentioned, right, now coming back into the presentation, we'll jump into the next pillar of Akamai's serverless story, which is the HKV. So the KV is basically stands for the key value store. Now let us understand what exactly do you mean by a key value store. A key value store in very simple term is basically like a dictionary. It's like how you have a unique word in dictionary associated with a specific meaning. A key value store is something similar to that, where every unique key in a database will have an associated value with it. So it is basically a semi-structured database, not something as complex or as traditional as maybe a SQL database. However, the whole idea is that along with EdgeWorker, the HKV or the key value store kind of complements by providing this data store that can work exclusively with workflows designed for EdgeWorker. Now, what are the key benefits or what exactly this HKV helps achieve it? The first key thing to be noted here is that this is a globally distributed, high availability, and replicated database structure. So, like the serverless computing platform of EdgeWorker, this whole architecture of maintaining the replica sets ensuring that these regions are always available and managing its data store completely falls onto the Akamai. So it is again part of the serverless story where you can just store the values that is required from your business logic perspective, or which is required for your workflow or the use case, which an edge worker will help you do. And basically leverage the capabilities of the Akamai platform along with it. Now, to kind of access this key value store, there are built-in JavaScript libraries available with EdgeWorker, using which a developer can basically query it to basically read the value that is available in this database. If they want to write back something, they can also write and modify the existing values. And all these things can be managed programmatically using APIs that are available, as well as the access to this database can also be managed to tokenized access. So that way, you know exactly who is able to access what about this database in terms of the permissions as well. So that way, it ensures that there is a safe and secure access to whoever is having whoever is having to manage the information available on this database, and at the same time you can leverage the information programmatically within the edge worker as well. Now, coming to the important question of what are the different use cases, or what are the different things where an edge worker or an HKV kind of can be leveraged. Now, obviously, the whole concept of serverless computing is pretty new that as we see. Uh, there can be dependencies in terms of how your application is architected today and how your workflows are designed. However, the possibilities in this specific instance are limitless, to be honest. So here on this slide, while we are trying to give you some ideas of how you can basically use these services, the actual possibilities are, as I said, up to your use case and how the developer imagine it. Now, however, if I want to kind of break up all the different use cases into the different categories where it comes in, I would say we can distribute into three main categories, like what we are showing in this specific slide. The first one, what we can call as edge logics. So which are very simple logics that can be developed on the edge servers, like URL redirects, maybe doing some session management of cookies, or even the user agent detection use case, which Ram just demoed like a couple of minutes back. So they all fall under the edge logic use case, where you can basically write simple use cases that can be executed at the edge for some simpler and smaller functionalities. The next set of use cases will be specific to the content delivery part. Now, Akamai as a platform has been the leaders on the content delivery side, and you can use EdgeWorker to complement your existing CDN workflows. So as part of your current CDN workflows, there might be instances that you are using some different origins behind the scenes as a load balancer using the global traffic manager of Akamai. There can be instances where you are using dynamic caching of Akamai, which requires different cache key or combinations being used. So you can use EdgeWorker to complement these already existing workflows to kind of enhance them or customize them using the JavaScript code, using JavaScript that the EdgeWorker lets you run on. The last one is a lot more detail or a lot more in-depth integration with your existing application, which is on the microservices side. So since these JavaScripts in the end of the day can execute fairly complex business use cases, you can actually use the edge worker to run microservices on the edge compute platform to kind of use it like a quasi API gateway. You can also use it like a completely dedicated edge authentication engine in case you want to do some auth workflows in your application, just to name a few of those. So that way, if you want to get really in depth on those things, you can definitely look at edge workers to execute some fairly complex use cases and start using this platform for microservices architecture as well. Now, these are, as I said, a few of the different ideas that we are kind of seeing different customers are using edge workers for. And there are a lot of other possibilities, and it is actually documented in a GitHub. So I will be touching upon that also a little bit later in the slide deck. Now, to complement all these functionalities of EdgeWorkers and HKV, as I kind of touched upon earlier, so these products or the services of Akamai are very developer centric, and as expected from any product which a developer would use on, we have invested heavily into having development tools that can help enable the developers to leverage or use these products in the right manner and in a as easy as possible to them. So for that, obviously, there are the Akamai CLIs and APIs available using which all this entire workflow can be integrated as programmatically in your workflows as part of your CI/CD pipelines. There is also a sandbox environment that is available where the developer can write and execute the edge worker codes in a safe in a safe Q&A environment. So that way you can kind of validate the functionality of your code before anything goes into the production network. On top of it, there is an integrated development environment that is available as part of the Akamai Control Center in the Luna itself. So if the administrator has to want to look at more of a UI-driven approach, that is also integrated available as part of this entire solution. Now, what are the next steps on this particular thing? So as a next steps, one thing I would, sorry, excuse me for that. One thing I would recommend all the customers to kind of do is sign up for the free EdgeWorker beta available on the developer.akamai platform. So by this, you can basically enable it into your accounts and start using or playing around with the EdgeWorker and explore the different possibilities that it provides with. Once you sign up for the EdgeWorker, the documentation for the same is available on learn.akamai.com. You get all the required information in terms of how to set up a simple EdgeWorker, how to deploy an EdgeWorker to the Akamai staging network or production network, how to use the different APIs for the EdgeWorker as well as the HKV, integrating the Akamai CLI as part of your workflow, and how to and basically set up a sandbox environment to basically execute the EdgeWorkers. Sorry, and all the associated information to troubleshoot any issues that might come up with it. So all those informations are available as part of this documentation in the learn.akamai.com. Then last but not the least, there is a dedicated GitHub page where multiple use cases of the edge workers are being documented. So these are the use cases which which our product team has come up with internally, as well as few of the use cases which we have seen few customers use it as well. Now you can use this use cases or the code snippets or the code examples available in the GitHub as a quick start thing if you want to quickly get onto the edge worker and start leveraging it. However, there are a lot more use cases that is again possible based on your specific requirement. Now, this GitHub page definitely gives you a lot more ideas and a lot more ready to use code bases that can accelerate your adoption of edge worker as well. Now, with that, we come to the end of the presentation for today. We did intentionally keep it a little bit short and crisp so that everybody gets the message in a very accurate manner. And at the same time, we wanted to dedicate more time to any questions that customers will have. So, Venta, I think we can unmute the customers so that if anybody has any questions, they can feel free to ask us.
Yes, now everyone has been unmuted. Please feel free to speak out if you have any questions. Okay, sorry for that. I'm muting everyone again. I'm seeing there are two more questions in the chat box. Naminis, could you read that and take that, please, with Ram?
Yeah, let me just take a look at the chat box. Sorry. Okay.
And let me read that for you, actually.
Yeah, I think I'm not able to see it, Venta, unfortunately.
Okay. Yeah, the first question is, does it mean we can move our website JavaScripts to the edge servers to reduce the time it takes to access the origin servers?
Okay, okay, now I'm able to read. Okay, that we can move our website JavaScript to edge servers to reduce the time it takes to access the origin servers. Understood. To answer that question, it depends very much on the use case, like what exactly that JavaScript on your website is doing. So if the particular JavaScript is used more for rendering your website on the front end or any kind of client side or a browser side session management, then they may not be the ideal candidates to move to the edge workers. However, if the JavaScript is there to basically customize the front end page, like maybe it will execute, write certain HTML tags into the page on a dynamic basis, and then construct the page on the client side. Those are the kind of use cases that can be offloaded to edge worker, so that you can construct the HTML on the edge and the edge servers itself and deliver a fully constructed HTML to the end user. So that would, it depends on the use case. And probably this example gives you some idea, under what use case the edge worker can potentially help you. The next question I see is there any security issue? Because the JavaScript edge function can read sensitive HTTP post data sending from customer. That's a very good question as well. Security is definitely at the forefront of this entire architecture. So all the JavaScripts on the edge worker is executed as part of the PCI compliant secure network of Akamai today. So these servers of Akamai complies to all the PCI DSS compliance. So there are security measures taken in terms of how we manage the data on these edge servers, both from a physical security standpoint as well as from the system security standpoint as well. So even though the data is being read by Akamai servers, it is in an unencrypted fashion. The entire set of security measures that we have taken into account ensures that there is no data leak or data being exfiltrated from our systems. So those checks and balances is already in place, and your data is secure when it's being used and executed by the edge workers. The next question is example JavaScript for generating the captcha code. I'm just trying to get a little bit more detail on this question. Is this question means that can we use edge worker to execute a JavaScript that would put a captcha code into the HTML page? Is that a right understanding of the question, Kit?
Kit, I just unmuted you. Feel free.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, so yes, the answer is yes. If you are looking at maybe fetching a captcha from a third-party service provider, writing it into the HTML page before the HTML is delivered to the end user, yes, that is a use case the edge worker can help you achieve.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, just to add to that, I think that's a great question. We've seen a lot of customers from APJ who implement their own logic via EdgeWorker. It can be capture code, it can be a redirect, it can be a customer queuing mechanisms. Sometimes customer use their own code or writes their own code. We also see cases where customer just move their third-party code from their origin and execute those code on Akamai Edge and making it more efficient. So there are multiple ways to leverage this computing capability on Akamai Edge. Any more questions from the audience?
Yeah. So while if anybody has any question, definitely you can think about it and maybe you can ask us or put it in the Q&A. But in the meantime, I just wanted to give a quick overview of the GitHub repository, which I just touched upon, so that everybody is aware of how the entire information is structured in GitHub and what are the different use cases that we have already seen. Few customers have implemented it and they're already using it in the live production. So at a very high level, the use cases are split up between the edge KV kind of use cases and an edge worker only use case. So I will get into the edge worker only use case so that we get some, because that is where most of the use cases would generally reside on. And as you can see, there are this high level categorization that we have already done in GitHub, which says, bundling third-party modules, right? Like the capture use case that you just mentioned, where you want to make a request for a separate third-party endpoint to fetch a capture, write it into an HTML page. So that kind of use cases. There can be these CDN specific use case, like how you want to control or manipulate the caching on Akamai using edge workers. So that comes under the next set of use cases. Control origin routes, it is basically like an A/B testing use case, control origin routes, or it can also be something like an application load balancer use case. Now, those are the kind of rerouting that you want to do on the edge using the edge worker, so that you can split the traffic to different endpoints on your infrastructure based on certain predefined logic. So those come under the control origin routes section. Then respond from edge worker. So this is where as Ram was explaining, right? So edge worker has 5 main events based on which the code can get executed. The last of those events was the response provider. Now, the response provider in very simple term is basically like a surrogate origin. So you can basically use response provider to construct a response on the edge server itself. Now, those kind of use cases of what and all you can respond from edge worker, what are the different possibilities that we have seen few customers use are kind of documented under the respond from edge worker section. Then the next one is work with the cookies, which is fairly self-explanatory. So working with the cookies is all about, managing certain sessions, managing certain cookie-based operations, like setting the cookie, resetting the cookies, maybe deleting certain cookies or adding new ones, so that you can basically do some amount of workflows which are very specific to cookies in this entire thing. Then other use cases are like issuing redirects, like the one that Ram just demoed. Based on the user agent, you want to redirect or maybe throw a different page to the end user. Those are the use cases that comes under it. And then work with request properties. So when I say request properties, it can mean working with any of the request parameters. It can be your cookie, which is another part of the request. It can be maybe some sort of content, some type of request headers like the user agent. It can be some sort of language header that comes in. So any of those manipulations that you want to do with the request properties are categorized under it. If I just have to double click into the response provider, you can see there are 2 main things, something called as API orchestration, and another called response manipulation. So the response manipulation example basically gives you on how you can read into an HTML, how you can pinpoint the specific start and end point in an HTML where a specific tag or some sort of HTML body has to be injected on the Akamai Edge server. So that is the example which the response manipulation stream kind of talks about. The API orchestration is basically an example of how an edge worker can be used as a API gateway. So in this specific API orchestration example, what we are doing is that we are basically making request for 3 APIs, something like endpoint 1, endpoint 2, endpoint 3. And once the response for these 3 API comes in, the edge worker code, which I'm just showing you at this point, basically merges it into a single response. So you're basically taking 3 input APIs and then merging them into a single API response body, something like in a JSON format, and then delivering a single API response back to the end user. So that way you can write like a simple JavaScript to make different requests, construct the API response by merging different inputs and then delivering it out to the end user. So that way, a lot of different possibilities are, is something that we are seeing different customers use the edge workers for. You can see a lot more examples, and this will definitely give you more clarity on what is possible versus what may not be possible with edge worker.
Navneet, there's a question from the audience. Let me read it out for you. The question is, since serverless and cloud computing are very new terms, do you think these current Akamai functions are already cloud native? Or Akamai did develop and open new edge computing features for customers as a new cloud service?
Okay, that's a very interesting question. So I will answer the first one, which is, do you think these current Akamai functions are already cloud native? So there are other vendors, who are operating in a very similar space. Akamai, since Akamai has been more of a serverless platform, as what I kind of touched upon, right? So we have been more of a vendor-defined serverless platform. And now with this EdgeWorker, we are opening up to a customer-defined logic. So that is where the next question that you just mentioned, right, comes into the picture, which is, or Akamai did develop and open new edge computing features for customers, right? So the straight answer to it is we had these capabilities already available. They were all generally leveraged by existing Akamai products like Ion, the WAF, the bot manager. So we did have the device detection module called edge device characterization. We did have a geo detection module called the Edgescape module. So all these things always existed on our platform, just that they were always leveraged in one or the other products of Akamai, as part of the vendor-defined serverless computing that we did. But now we are exposing all of them to through an edge worker so that the customers can start using it in a JavaScript language using a logic that they can define. And the compute that we have always used for our products is basically getting exposed to execute this JavaScript that the customers will write. I hope that answered your question, Lynn.
Yeah, and just add to the first part on cloud native. I think EdgeWorker and EdgeKV, customers only need to worry about the code, but no need to worry about the underlying infrastructure. You don't need to design the how to scale the infrastructure, and you don't need to consider high availability. That's all been taken care of by Akamai and the platform itself. And also we are very DevOps friendly. We have APIs and tools that allow you to integrate Akamai as part of your CI/CD workflow. So on those aspects, I would say this is a purely cloud native solution. Thank you for the question.
Yeah, and as I kind of touched upon, you can visit learn.akamai.com, go into the EdgeWorkers section. You will get all the documents for EdgeWorkers as well as HKV. So all the current available things that are available for EdgeWorker, like how to get started with EdgeWorker, what are the APIs available, are there any kind of limits in terms of what is the maximum size of JavaScript that you can upload, what is the maximum number of CPU time that you can utilize for an EdgeWorker. They're all kind of documented under the limitation section. Any other FAQs that you have, there is a specific section for that. Also, the GitHub repository, you can get the link even from this documentation so that you can just refer back to it as well.
Okay, since we have 10 minutes left, feel free to type in more questions if you have, and Ram would do a quick demo of how we implement EdgeWorker on Akamai platform. Ram, I'm handing the presenter role to you.
Sure, thank you, Linda. Are you all able to hear me?
Yep.
Okay, great. So for those developers who are there on the call, or even others who would like to start off kickstart with using EdgeWorkers on your environment, I thought we can just run through quickly how you can get it working on your site. And as Navneet mentioned, you can sign up for the EdgeWorker beta, and you would be basically be able to configure. So just like your your property manager configuration, okay. So you would be able to configure EdgeWorkers using the control center, okay. So when you go into EdgeWorkers configuration, you can create your EdgeWorker ID to add the code. So in this case, the example that I showed you, I would run through that to show you basically the code and how I added that. So you can see this is my specific EdgeWorker ID that I've created. Okay, and I've done a few iterations of the code, testing it and making sure it works. So you can see my my activation history. Okay, so when I go onto the version, you can tell it shows about basically the staging deployment and production deployment details. Okay, and of course there are also reports, all those available. Okay. Now once the code is deployed, you can actually also see how to add this as part of your property to get it executed. So in this case, I have actually my property called ram.akamai.ewdemo.com. Okay, so this is the URL that I actually earlier showed you, ram.test.ht.net. So I've got that configured on here, and as part of this, the default rule for this particular server, I have configured the EdgeWorkers property. Just like adding any behavior, you just have to add that. That's it. So okay. So in this case, I've added this towards the last so that it overrides any other setting that is there previously, and I specifically use the identifier that I created just now. I showed you under the EdgeWorker configuration. Okay. So if you further want to go down and see the code details, as the code that I copied onto the screen, you can see that there is one, you can see the bundle.json, which is having the detail of the version, and then the main.js, which is actually the entire code base. Okay, so as you see here, this is the example that I showed you earlier, where we have the the three different use cases, three different scenarios for this use case where a supported browser and version can be tested. Okay. Yeah, so this is a quick example of how you all can actually kickstart by having your own small example. You can just start from as simple as showing a hello message on screen, and then from there onwards you can start getting making it much more complex and bigger use cases you can execute. Okay. Yeah. Any other questions right now?
Yeah, thank you, Ram.
Thank you.
We have 5 minutes left. Any more questions from the audience? Feel free to type in the Q&A box. And we are planning on another more deep dive session in a lab format towards the end of February. If you are interested, please let your Akamai sales rep know. And we are happy to do a one-on-one customer workshop on that as well, besides a broader online lab session. Also, after this session, we'll share all the documentations shared today, including our GitHub repository, all those code examples, all the documentations on EdgeWorker and EdgeKVs. Hope you could explore that and come up with your own great use cases on the edge. And also after the session, please to take 1 minute to fill out the survey form so we can know how we can serve you better in our future sessions. And we want to say we really appreciate all the engagement today. Thank you so much. And thank you, Navneet and Ram.
Thank you, everyone. Hope this was useful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Bye.